The smell hit me first. It always did. A coppery, sweet rot that clung to the back of my throat. It was the smell of a life cut short, of secrets spilled onto expensive hardwood floors. This one was different, though. It was cleaner, more deliberate. The victim, a wealthy socialite named Eleanor Vance, was arranged like a broken doll in the centre of her stark white living room. Her limbs were posed, her head tilted just so. It wasn't just murder. It was a statement. A sick, twisted piece of performance art. The room was cold, the air conditioning humming a low, mournful tune that seemed to mock the stillness. My partner, Detective Jack Corbin, knelt beside the body. He didn't seem bothered by the smell or the sight. He was always like that. A rock in the middle of a storm of chaos. His focus was absolute, his eyes scanning every detail with an unnerving intensity. He pointed a gloved finger toward the wall, no forced entry. The security system was disabled from the inside. She knew him. She let him in. His voice was calm, a low baritone that cut through the silence. He was good, the best I'd ever worked with. He saw things other people missed, the tiny details that cracked a case wide open. Jack ran a hand through his dark, dishevelled hair. He looked tired, but his mind was always sharp, always turning. He had a way of piecing together the narrative of a crime scene, of seeing the ghost of the events that had transpired. "Look at the precision," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "The cuts are clean, surgical. Our guy is meticulous. He doesn't like a mess." He stood up and walked the perimeter of the room, his gaze sweeping from the floor to the ceiling. It was like watching a predator track its prey, except the prey was already gone, and we were left with the bloody aftermath. I watched him, my own stomach churning. I was the one who felt things too deeply, the one who saw the faces of the victims in my sleep. Jack was the shield, the one who processed the horror, so I didn't have to drown in it. He was the logic to my emotion, the steady hand that kept me grounded. "So, another one for the composer," I said, using the name the press had given our killer. Jack just nodded, his jaw tight. He hated the media's nicknames. He said it gave the killer power, made him a celebrity. He was right, of course. He was always right. And I trusted him completely. Our partnership wasn't just professional. It was a lifeline. We had come up through the academy together, two ambitious rookies eager to make a name for ourselves. We'd seen the worst of the city, the dark underbelly that most people pretended didn't exist. We had pulled each other out of burning buildings and talked each other down from the ledge of burnout more times than I could count. Jack Corbin was more than my partner, he was my brother. He knew my coffee order by heart and could tell when I was lying just by the twitch in my left eye. That was the kind of trust that was forged in shared trauma and late-night stakeouts. We worked like a well-oiled machine. He was the strategist, the one who could see the entire chessboard, while I was the one who could read people, who could coax a confession out of a suspect with a well-placed question or a shared cigarette. We complemented each other perfectly. In the office, our desks were pushed together, a chaotic mess of cold case files, empty coffee cups and takeout containers. It was our island in a sea of departmental bureaucracy. We had each other's backs, no questions asked. It was the unspoken rule of our partnership, the foundation upon which everything was built. This case, the composer case, had tested us more than any other. The killer was smart, elusive and always one step ahead. The pressure was immense. Coming down from the captain, the mayor, the media, every new body felt like a personal failure. Through it all, Jack remained the constant. He was the one who would show up at my apartment with a bottle of whiskey after a particularly gruesome discovery. He was the one who reminded me why we did this job, to speak for the dead, to bring justice to the ones who could no longer demand it for themselves. Our bond was our greatest weapon against the darkness we faced every day. We shared everything, every theory, every lead, every gut feeling. There were no secrets between us, or so I thought. We were a team, a single unit moving against the tide of violence that threatened to swallow our city whole. He was the anchor and I was the sail, and together we navigated the storm. I never once considered that the biggest threat, the darkest secret, might be sitting right across from me, sharing a cheap cup of office coffee and dissecting the mind of a monster. The third victim was a musician, a cellist, found in his studio, posed with his instrument as if in the middle of a final, silent performance. The scene was just as meticulous, just as cold as the others. Jack was there before me, already deep in his analysis. As I surveyed the room, something caught my eye. On the victim's music stand, amidst the scattered sheets of a Bach sonata, was a small hand-tied fishing fly. It was an intricate thing made of vibrant feathers and thread. It was out of place, a strange calling card left by the killer. It felt deeply personal, almost like a private joke. Later that week we were back at the office, staring at the evidence board until our eyes burned. The board was a chaotic collage of crime scene photos, victim profiles, and timelines. Nothing connected them, nothing except the killer's chilling signature. I was exhausted, running on caffeine and frustration. I glanced over at Jack, who was staring intently at the board. He was idly fiddling with something in his hands, a habit he had when he was deep in thought. It was a small, intricate object, a hand-tied fishing fly, identical to the one we found at the cellist's apartment. My blood ran cold. I tried to dismiss it. It had to be a coincidence. Jack was an avid fly fisherman. He spent his weekends on the river, trying to escape the city's grime. He probably had dozens of them in his desk, in his car. But this one, it was the same pattern, the same vibrant green and blue feathers. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I asked him about it, trying to keep my voice casual, light. "Hey, where'd you get that?" I asked, pointing to the fly. He looked up, his eyes unreadable. "Made it," he said simply. "Helps me think." He went back to staring at the board, but the air between us had changed. The seed of doubt had been planted. It was a tiny, poisonous thing, but it began to grow in the dark corners of my mind. I started replaying conversations, re-examining his behavior at the crime scenes. His calmness, his unnerving focus, his ability to get inside the killer's head. Was it brilliant detective work, or was it something else? Was he predicting the killer's moves, or was he reminiscing? The thought was absurd, a betrayal of everything I knew to be true, but I couldn't shake it. The fishing fly was the first crack in the mirror, and when I looked at my partner, I started to see a stranger staring back. The suspicion was a constant low-grade fever. It made me sweat in the middle of the night and left a bitter taste in my mouth. I started watching Jack, not just as a partner, but as a subject. I observed the way he talked, the way he moved, the things he didn't say. Every calm analysis of a crime scene now sounded like a boast. Every insightful theory felt like a confession hidden in plain sight. I was living in a state of hypervigilance, my senses on high alert. The man I had trusted with my life was now the source of my deepest fear. The paranoia was a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I began to feel like I was losing my mind. Was I projecting my own exhaustion and frustration onto him? Was the pressure of the case making me see monsters in the shadows? I would look at him across our desks, laughing at a bad joke from one of the uniforms, and he would seem so normal, so much like the old Jack. Then he would turn his attention back to the case files, and a certain coldness would settle over his features, a familiar mask of intensity that now looked sinister. I was caught in a dizzying loop of doubt and reassurance, each one feeding the other. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams were a twisted landscape of the crime scenes, but in them, the killer always had Jack's face. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding against my ribs. The trust we had built over a decade was eroding, crumbling away with each new suspicion. I felt utterly alone, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. I couldn't talk to anyone. Who would believe me, accusing the department's star detective, my own partner, of being a serial killer? They would think I had finally cracked under the pressure. I was isolated with my terror. The fear was suffocating. I started carrying my service weapon with me even when I was off duty. I double-checked the locks on my doors at night. Every time my phone rang and I saw Jack's name on the screen, a jolt of pure dread shot through me. The man who used to be my safety net had become the monster under my bed. The partnership that had once been my strength was now my greatest vulnerability. He knew my routines, my weaknesses, my secrets. If he was who I thought he was, I was in terrible, terrible danger. The decision to investigate him was the hardest I'd ever made. It felt like a profound betrayal, a violation of the sacred code between partners. But the alternative, doing nothing while he potentially killed again, was unthinkable. I had to know the truth, no matter how ugly. My investigation had to be a ghost operation. I couldn't leave a paper trail, couldn't raise any red flags. I started small, working late at night when the precinct was empty, using my own laptop instead of the department's computers. I began by digging into his past, looking for anything that didn't fit the perfect image he presented. While we were working the case together during the day, I was secretly working a case against him at night. The duality was tearing me apart. During our interviews with witnesses, I would watch him, analysing his questions, searching for a slip-up. At crime scenes, I wasn't just looking for clues left by the composer. I was looking for clues left by Jack. I had to maintain the illusion of our partnership, to laugh at his jokes and listen to his theories, all while a silent scream was building inside me. It was an exhausting performance, a dance on a razor's edge. One night, fueled by a desperate need for answers, I did the unthinkable. I broke into his house. I knew he was on a stakeout across town, giving me a narrow window. My heart hammered against my ribs as I picked the lock on his back door, the metallic click echoing like a gunshot in the silent suburban street. His house was immaculate, obsessively neat and orderly, a stark contrast to the chaos of our shared office space. It was sterile, devoid of personal touches except for one room in the basement. It was his workshop, the place where he tied his fishing flies. The workshop was a shrine to precision. Tools were arranged on a pegboard with surgical neatness. Spools of thread were sorted by colour. And there, on a small wooden workbench, was a box. Inside were dozens of hand-tied flies, each one a miniature work of art. Tucked beneath them I found a small leather-bound journal. My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't a diary, it was a ledger. It contained detailed notes on our victims, their routines, their habits, their fears. It was a killer's playbook, and the handwriting was unmistakably Jack's. The truth was colder and harder than I could have imagined. Leaving my house that night, with the knowledge burning a hole in my gut, I felt a shift in the air. The game had changed. It was no longer just about suspicion. It was about survival. I had the proof, but what could I do with it? I couldn't just walk into the captain's office with a stolen journal. It was inadmissible, fruit of the poisonous tree. Jack would deny it, and my career would be over. I would be the crazy cop who framed his partner. I had to be smarter. I had to play his game, using his own rules of patience and precision against him. He was the hunter, but now I was hunting him. He started to notice the change in me. I could feel his eyes on me when I wasn't looking. He was a master at reading people, and he could sense my distance, my unease. The easy banter between us disappeared, replaced by a tense, heavy silence. He would ask me if I was okay, his voice laced with a concern that now seemed predatory. "You seem distracted, man," he said one afternoon, his gaze sharp and probing. "This case getting to you?" I forced a smile and blamed it on lack of sleep, but I knew he didn't buy it. He was testing me, waiting for me to slip up. The tension became a living thing, a third presence in the car with us on stakeouts, in the office as we pored over files. It was a high-stakes chess match where one wrong move would mean checkmate. I had to keep him close, to continue working the case with him, all while secretly building a new one against him. I started documenting everything, every strange comment, every inconsistency in his alibis. I bought a burner phone and began communicating with a trusted contact in the forensics lab, feeding them small pieces of evidence to test off the books. He grew more suspicious. He started asking questions about my whereabouts after hours. He would casually drop by my apartment unannounced, checking to see if I was home. I felt his presence everywhere, a constant shadow lurking just behind me. The fear was no longer a vague dread, it was a sharp, specific terror. He knew I was onto him. We were no longer partners. We were two predators circling each other, each waiting for the other to show a moment of weakness. The hunt was on, and I knew with chilling certainty that only one of us was going to walk away. The breakthrough I needed came from an unexpected source. The forensics contact I had been secretly working with called me on the burner phone. "You were right to have me retest the fibres from the Vance scene," she whispered, her voice tight with anxiety. "The original report said they were common carpet fibres, but they're not. They're specialised synthetic fibres used almost exclusively in soundproofing foam, the kind you'd find in a recording studio or a custom-built vehicle." A cold dread washed over me. Jack had recently bought a new van, boasting about how he'd had it customised for long stakeouts. Armed with this new piece of the puzzle, I pieced together my plan. It had to be perfect, leaving no room for error. I couldn't confront him directly at the precinct. He had too many friends, too many people who would take his side. I had to lure him somewhere isolated, somewhere I could control the environment. I had to get him to confess, and I needed to record it. It was a massive risk. If I failed, he would kill me without a second thought, and he would be clever enough to make it look like an accident or a suicide. My career, my life, it was all on the line. I used the case as bait. I told him I'd gotten an anonymous tip about a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place where the killer might be hiding his trophies. I made it sound urgent, a major break in the case. "The tipster said he's there now, Jack. We have to go. Just us. No backup until we confirm. We can't risk a media leak." I watched his face carefully for any sign of suspicion. For a moment his eyes narrowed, searching mine for deceit. Then a slow, cold smile spread across his lips. "Good work," he said. "Let's go get this son of a bitch." He thought I was leading him to a suspect. In reality, I was leading him into a trap. As we drove out to the abandoned warehouse district, the silence in the car was deafening. The city lights faded behind us, replaced by the dark skeletal shapes of forgotten factories. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I had a wire taped to my chest, its receiver feeding a live signal to a device hidden in my own car, parked a few blocks away. It was a desperate, foolish plan, something out of a cheap cop movie, but it was the only plan I had. I glanced over at Jack. He was staring straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel, a look of calm, predatory anticipation on his face. He was ready to meet the killer. He had no idea he was already sitting right next to him. The drive felt like an eternity. Every mile we covered took us further from safety, deeper into the territory of my own design. The city's glow vanished from the rearview mirror, swallowed by an inky blackness. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the crunch of gravel under the tyres as we turned onto the deserted access road. I kept my hand resting casually on my hip, just inches from the cold steel of my gun. My senses were on fire. I was aware of every breath he took, every slight shift in his seat. The man beside me was a stranger, a monster wearing the face of my best friend. He broke the silence, his voice smooth and even, but with an undercurrent I'd never noticed before. "You've been quiet lately, Leo," he said, not taking his eyes off the road. "Something on your mind?" It was a test, a baited hook cast into the dark water between us. I had to play my part perfectly. "Just this case, man," I replied, forcing a weary tone. "It's getting to me. All the dead ends, it feels like he's smarter than us." I watched his profile in the dim dashboard light. A faint smirk played on his lips. "He is smarter than most," Jack said. "That's why it's been so fun." Fun. The word hung in the air, cold and sharp. It confirmed everything. The thrill for him wasn't in the justice, it was in the game. He was toying with us, with the entire department from the inside. He was the puppet master, and we were all his marionettes, dancing on the strings he pulled. My blood ran cold, but I couldn't let him see my reaction. I had to keep him talking, keep him comfortable. The warehouse was just ahead, a hulking shadow against the moonless sky. This was it, the final act. We pulled up to the rusted chain-link fence of the abandoned factory. Jack killed the engine, and the sudden silence was immense, pressing in on us from all sides. "All right," he said, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Let's be careful. We don't know what we're walking into." The irony was so thick I could choke on it. He reached for his weapon, his movements fluid and practiced. I did the same, my hand closing around the grip of my own gun. We were two partners, preparing to face a killer, standing on the precipice of a truth that would destroy us both. We moved through the dark warehouse. our flashlight beams cutting through the thick dust and cobwebs. The place was a tomb, filled with the ghosts of forgotten industry. Every creak of the floorboards, every drip of water from the leaky roof echoed in the cavernous space. "He's not here," Jack said, his voice tight with what I now knew was feigned disappointment. "Your tip was a bust." We were standing in the centre of the vast empty floor. This was my moment, my chance. I took a deep breath, the wire on my chest feeling like a brand. "The tip wasn't a bust, Jack," I said, my voice steady. "I'm the one who called it in." He turned slowly, a look of confusion on his face that quickly hardened into something else, something cold and calculating. "What are you talking about, Leo?" I kept my flashlight beam trained on his face, watching his eyes. The composer. The composer who likes bark. The composer who leaves hand-tied fishing flies as a calling card. The composer who uses soundproofing fibers from his custom van to clean up a scene. With every word, the mask of my partner, my friend, slipped away, revealing the monster underneath. He didn't deny it, he just smiled. A chilling, empty smile. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for," he said, his voice calm, almost admiring. "I knew something was off with you for weeks. How did you know?" His question wasn't born of panic, it was born of professional curiosity. He was a craftsman admiring another's work. "You got sloppy, Jack. You brought your work home with you." I thought of the journal, of the flies, of all the little pieces that had led me here. He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that made my skin crawl. "Sloppy," he repeated. "No, I just got bored. It's no fun playing a game when no one else is good enough to play." He took a step toward me. "So what now, Leo? You going to shoot your partner, your brother?" My hand was shaking, but my aim was true. All those years, all that trust, it was all a lie. He had been standing beside me at every crime scene, watching me grieve for the victims he had created. He had comforted me, guided me, all while hiding the darkest secret of all. He wasn't my brother. He was just a reflection of the darkness we fought. A man who had stared into the abyss for so long that it had stared back and claimed him. "No," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm not going to shoot my partner." I raised my gun. "I'm going to shoot a killer."